Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another tenacious episode of The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. And here's your host, Alan Mosley.
Thank you so much for joining us back at The Gold Standard. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined, I do this about once a month, joined by my sidekick, producer, really the guy who makes this all possible, Blake Osborne. Blake, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, sir. I'm doing good. A little tired.
Well, we know
But,
that's...
you know,
we
that's,
know-
I'm always tired.
We know that's a lie.
I know it's a lie.
That's a lie.
It's a lie.
Guys, if you want to join us on social media, you can do so on Facebook until we get deplatformed, which is facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. Twitter is at Alan M. Mosley. We're a part of the Little L Productions Network, which includes other fine programs as Postcards from Somalia, The Sherry Voluntary Show, Sports Ball with Mike and Alan, and now most recently, Godarchy, the newest show to Little L Productions.
Cool.
That's hosted by Mike Meharry.
Sweet.
And he's particularly grumpy on it.
Oh.
So you should check it out.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, that's the best kind of mic. And our guest today would know what the best kind of mic is. Our guest today is our good friend, Clay Davis.
There he
Clay is the regional coordinator, grassroots specialist extraordinaire for the 10th Amendment Center, but has also done work, and we're going to talk about it today, with We See You Watching Lexington, which deals with the... spy cameras on every corner. And you know what? I didn't need another reason not to go to Kentucky, but now I'm not going to go to Kentucky. So, Clay, how are you doing?
Hey, Alan, how's it going today? Glad to be here with you.
You know, I'm making it.
You making
Well,
what?
I can't even talk to you. I can't even talk to you. Just cut your mic. We're talking to Clay now. So, Clay, we were talking right before the show. Before we get into any of the juicy stuff that we were going to talk about, let's go ahead and hit the breaking news. So, how many bombs did you send, and why did you send them?
I don't want any drone strikes in Kentucky. That's not going to take.
Well, they already know where you are.
Yeah.
Any point for any drone strikes whatsoever. So.
Yeah. So.
But, according to the news, there were, 3 of them?
Yeah. Well, only 3? Well, I know Hillary Clinton was on the list.
Hillary, I guess, former President Obama.
Uh-huh.
And apparently there was one addressed to former CIA Director John Brennan, the drone strike master himself, to CNN.
So really, he should have seen it coming, is what you're telling me.
Should have seen that one coming, except he had his, didn't he have his clearance revoked?
He did. He did have his clearance revoked. That's right. So he knew about as much as I did.
Right? Yeah, he's in the dark.
So we're going to cover this real quick before we move on to the juicy Lexington stuff. So you said right before the show, I want you to kind of share this on air because it was awesome. So my question to you was, is there anything to it, or is that just hashtag fake news? And you said it was a distraction. So tell me about that.
I think it could be a distraction. Anything's possible, especially with an election coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what the source was, if this was legitimate or if it was contrived in some way. I find it kind of interesting that President Trump just a few days ago, I think I saw an article where he said it was going to be difficult to unify the nation unless there was a big event to bring everyone together. And so here we are a few days later with a bigly event.
Yeah.
Of one of 2 bigly events, too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, so I wanted to mention too. So it's not just this whole pipe bombs being sent to a bajillion different addresses. We also have the barbarian hordes of Central and South Americans that are supposedly
descending upon us.
Yeah, descending upon us from our southern border. And of course, the president has made his thoughts well known that he's none too pleased with the lack of enforcement by our southern neighbors, such as Mexico, to stop this supposed caravan from reaching our border. Yeah, so never mind, of course, the fact that just logistically speaking, if there's literally thousands of people that have marched something like 1,700 miles to the south, that just seems a bit unrealistic. Yeah. And supposedly the speed at which they're moving. So I'm gonna say that seems like a whole lot of spin that just so coincidentally happens to be before the midterms.
Oh yeah.
Without question, it seems a little questionable. I think he may have been a little light on his evidence that there were Middle Eastern folks amidst the other folks, the other brown folks that were coming up.
Sure.
So, yeah, showmanship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we'll leave that alone for now because I had told you right before the show that sometimes when I see a breaking news article like that, I actually intentionally try to avoid it for 72 hours.
Yeah.
Because my hunch is one of two things. Either A, the story may be completely different in a few days,
Yep.
or B, we'll have moved on to another story and we won't even be talking about that in 3 days.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, you can actually watch hour by hour for those of us who have time to actually sit and watch the news, which is a waste of time anyway. But the developments will change hour by hour as they get different facts that counter the facts they've already reported. Usually within 24 hours, the story that was originally reported is so far from what was originally put out there. So yeah, you're right, man. It's good to give it a 72-hour buffer probably before you actually come up with what actually might have really happened. But by then it's been doctored a little bit too. So
I think the phrase that they prefer is alternative facts.
Yes.
Isn't that the one? Yeah.
have to get a barrage of alternative facts so that we can assess them and digest them and decide, what it is that we actually believe as a government. And so it's all arbitrary, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, so let's move on because that could go for days. Mike told me, our friend Mike Meharry told me, Alan, make sure you ask Clay when he comes on. He's got a juicy story to tell that ties into the surveillance watchdog work that you guys do up there in Kentucky, associated with We See You Watching Lexington and the 10th Amendment Center as a greater whole. Now, you recently, there was a mayoral debate, is that correct?
That's correct.
And surveillance came up.
Past couple days, I sent him some of the tidbits that I've uncovered from this, and he hasn't had a chance to get into it. Just kind of skimmed it. So just as I started talking to you, recording this session here, he's sitting here texting me stuff about what he's reading. So I was like, "Go away, Mike. I'm trying to take care of some business here, man."
Sure.
I got tipped off from one of the mayoral campaigns that there was a debate going on. Somehow it had fallen under my radar. So tracked down the audio to this debate, and it turns out that for several minutes they actually started talking about the surveillance issues. The moderator actually brought the subject up, which was really, really interesting, considering that there are just two of us, Michael Meharry and myself, who have been trying to bring some attention to this subject in the area. And it was pretty awesome that we were able to make this an issue in this debate, in this actual campaign. The fact that these two candidates took several minutes out of this debate to actually talk about surveillance concerns in Lexington was pretty amazing. We've come a long way with this, and it seems that both of them are willing to have a conversation. Both of them admit that there are concerns about abuse with technology and surveillance in the area, so that we get optimistic when we hear those kinds of things. We still have to operate under the assumption that they're going to be running a government that's currently suing Mike Meharry to keep their secret. And it's really interesting. The mayoral candidate who raised the most money, police chief here. So we were really, really interested in what his perspective was on surveillance. And he actually came out in this debate and admitted that he was originally against putting the spy pole in the park that caused our original campaign, caused us to get concerned about surveillance area. He came out and acknowledged that he was originally against the idea. And interestingly, I really wanted to get him into a forum like this because I knew, because of his police background, that once he started talking about this subject, the inevitable cop speak would come to the surface.
Sure.
Yeah.
What he said was that he did oppose the spy poll, but he felt that there were resources that the police department had that were better suited to combat the problems in the park that the cameras were originally put up for. What I interpret that interpreted that to mean was we already have 30 secret surveillance cameras that we could have used to monitor the activities in that park without putting a public park up or a public camera up and causing so much stir and so much public interest. He also did go on to mention the lawsuit and how the city lost the lawsuit because of the way that they've conducted this little spy poll experiment. So it was kind of interesting to hear him weigh in, and he did speak out about protecting people's right to privacy. But he's also asking for, he's calling for a modernization of policing in Lexington, and that's kind of concerning too, especially with the technological advances that are getting introduced in other cities.
Well, that, I'm left a little bit cynical by his remarks, and I'm sure you are as well, because it sounds to me that Fourth Amendment issues are totally not on the radar with how they're policing and using that technology. It's really more of a practicality conversation with him, which I guess we'll take our victories wherever we can get them, but that doesn't make me feel like they won't just do it again next week.
Right. I guess the big thing is, and our original intent here, we're not activists that just bitch and moan with no solutions. Mike and I originally set out to get an ordinance put in place here in Lexington that's going to provide accountability and transparency for not just the current technologies that are in use, but anything that might be introduced in the future, such as facial recognition, automatic license plate readers, stingrays or cell site simulators, all these really, really, really invasive technologies. Those things are not here yet, so we're trying to get ahead of the game on that. Mayor candidate Baston seems to be interested in talking about putting such an ordinance in place. But again, I remain really cynical too, just like you, Alan. I mean, until I actually see somebody sit down and have a conversation about these things and start talking, getting serious about it, I'm not going to really believe much.
Well, I mean, what do you say to the person that would say that, well, what makes a job like yours and Mike's really difficult is that by the time you're getting wind of things, the programs are already in place. Like, you would only know about stingrays because they're already in use. They maybe have been in use for months and you just didn't know it.
Yeah, a lot of times, especially with this, once things start getting leaked out about their existence, they've been in use for more than months. Typically, sometimes it can be years, decades, especially at the national level. The NSA is really bad about using stuff for years and years before it actually becomes evident to the public. Right now, the biggest thing is a lot of folks, even Michael Bolden was recently talking about, hey, is it too far gone? Is it too far to do anything about it yet? There's a lot of states that don't have NSA presence in them. And right now, part of my work with the 10th Amendment Center is to get the Fourth Amendment Protection Act pushed through in as many states as possible. California's already got this in place. It needs a little bit of tweaking. It's not quite where it needs to be, but they do have a law on the books. Michigan, just back in March, passed a really, really solid version of this bill. And what it does is it deprives federal agencies material resource and support from at the state level, whether it be using state agents or officers, as well as resources such as water and electricity, snow removal, any services that the local state government can provide, are deprived of the NSA or any other federal agency that is enacting or is currently acting out warrantless surveillance. It's a really, really awesome law. It is a tool that we can use if we implement this in as many states as possible to actually curtail some of the events that are taking place with all of this warrantless surveillance. Once we start boxing them in, then we can start focusing on the existing sites, the Bluffdale, Utah mass data facility that's gathering up and storing all this data. There's another one in San Antonio, Georgia, West Virginia. These little sites that have popped up all over the country. Probably not much we can do there because there have been contracts that have been signed and things like that. We work on the areas that haven't been proliferated, and then as these contracts start coming due to be re-signed and renegotiated, we start working it from that angle. It's kind of interesting because Edward Snowden, one of the things that he recommended was that we have a multi-pronged approach towards fighting surveillance. He thinks it's real important that guys in the tech industry start coming up with good, solid tech solutions to fighting surveillance, whether it be through encryption, making sure that from A to Z, everything that we do has some kind of protection that interferes with the government's ability to intercept our data. He also feels that guys like me need to work things from the legislative approach. If we work these things from different angles, then we're kind of hitting the beast from as many sides as possible, and we start coming up with real solutions that work. But as far as having just one answer, there's probably not one, man.
Well, let me ask you this. You had mentioned with your work with the 10th Amendment Center that there's at least a version of the 4th Amendment Protection Act in California, which I know a lot of your flyover country red states, in their minds, they're thinking that's the furthest from liberty you can be, right? California. And you'd also mentioned a really good bill that had been passed in the state of Michigan. Now, something that I deal with from a frustration standpoint is I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm an anarchist, so to hell with all of you. But what kills me is that, I'm a Southern guy. We're from Tennessee. We're your Southern neighbors. And we are surrounded by these people who purport themselves to be constitutional conservatives and, your 3%er types, your Tea Party types, your straight ticket Republicans who think that they're conservatives and they think that they're limited government and that they're pro-liberty. And yet it seems like those states are often the ones that are so deeply in bed with the feds, with the NSA, with government money for products, for police enforcement, for civil asset forfeiture, for stingray devices, for all these things. I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you approach that type of community, but try to get them to understand the message that, look, you say that that's what you believe, but when you support these programs, it's not really, the money's not talking there.
And that actually is probably going to fall a lot into my lap as with some of these new responsibilities I've taken on with the 10th Amendment Center. A lot of what I'm going to do is going to be grassroots outreach to not only working with legislators from state to state, but also trying to get some support from the communities that those legislators actually represent. So yeah, we'll probably be looking at figuring out the best ways to message to these folks. The biggest thing is, if we all have different opinions about the Constitution. I know that there are many who feel it is a failed document. It's still our law. It's still the law of the land. I don't think it's unreasonable to demand that, since it is still the supreme law of the land, that our government operate by that actual standard. So I guess making sure that folks realize that what we are asking for is actually asking for government. Not even that asking. I'm demanding it that government actually get back within constitutional constraints. It's really not an unreasonable thing to ask for, and once you demonstrate how far out the government has gotten and where it actually should be reined in, it at least opens the door for people to have a conversation about those things. Mm-hmm. One of the problems we've encountered in some of the states where the Fourth Amendment Protection Act has actually been introduced, or at least discussed with legislators, once there's a possibility for the bill to actually go to committee, there have been instances where government agents, especially as I understand it, from local National Guard, have gotten in touch with legislators and have urged them to not let the bill out of committee. We're not exactly sure why that is, but apparently this bill is problematic to the government. I'm wondering, and I haven't done the background work on this, but I'm wondering if, because it is the National Guard that is asking these state legislators not to get involved with this bill, if there has been threats to from the federal level that would intimidate and coerce these National Guard units to actually petition these legislators not to touch this bill. To me, the fact that they're actually going to the trouble of doing that is telling me that we're probably onto the right thing here.
Sure.
We find it very problematic. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Well, it definitely seems, I admire what you guys do, but it definitely seems like an uphill battle, because it's kind of what you're touching on there, that when you strike a nerve and you start to see who exactly is making up your opposition, you can't help but to start follow the money, right? And you start to see that so much money is pouring into local precincts, into law enforcement, into National Guards, and into state coffers somewhere. State in this case being 50 states, that money is flowing from the federal to the state level, or as we've touched on briefly with civil asset forfeiture, that so often state entities are willing to play along with federal enforcement because they're going to get a certain cut of the proceeds of whatever money is seized or whatever. So how then, I know this is a really loaded question, so how then do you begin to make your battle plan for how you're going to combat the people where even if in their wildest dreams they believed principally in some of the things you believe, but it's their paychecks that you're talking about? How do you deal with that?
It is definitely punching up. It's difficult to overcome sometimes, especially when people's pay is tied to it. You essentially you always have to get back to talking about the big picture, the dystopian state that this is leading to. I mean, we're sitting here on top of a surveillance apparatus that is so elaborate at this point that right now, as we speak, the case is being built against every one of us. It's being there's a case being built against you, a case definitely being built against me. definitely being having data gathered on me, and to the point where we have to worry about, even in my case, for people who even comment on threads that I have that may be surveillance based on social media, because the very fact that they're commenting on a thread that I'm making, it subjects them to actually being looked at and scrutinized by the NSA and some of these other government agencies, sometimes for 60 days or longer, mainly because they commented on something that I posted, just by simply having a conversation with me, because the nature of the work that I do and the activism that I participate in. Excuse me. So the conversation always has to come back to the dangerous state of the surveillance apparatus and where it's going. And just because your guy or your team person happens to be in charge right now, and the government may not be using these things against you personally, it's just a flip of the switch away from total tyranny. The wrong person ascending to power, and the flip of a switch, we're in communist China. We wake up one morning in communist China with rampant facial recognition and tracking of every citizen. It's not targeted. They're literally tracking every citizen, and we're no longer we're very close here to getting away from a society where everyone is innocent until proven guilty. We are so close to being removed from that, and basically living in a society where everyone's a suspect. And that, man, if that's not, I get frustrated because people don't get concerned about this. It's such a difficult conversation to get people excited about and to get people. It's the frustration is if you're not excited about it, if you're not pissed off about it, it means you're accepting of it. And I personally don't get it. I don't understand how people can be accepting of this and not fight out against it and not lash out against it and not stand and say, this is bullshit. This is not how we want to live. It's difficult, man. I don't know how successful I'm going to be, but I'm going to endeavor to have this conversation with people. I do it every day. If I can get one or two people on board, then
sure.
I can very small victory.
Well, let me play devil's advocate and hit you with a few of your really, really stereotypical softball type responses that you would get to people. So the first one I'll hit you with, and you kind of already touched on this, is the person that says that, well, I'm not as excited about this topic as you are, Clay, because these things that you're worried about, when I see on the news facial recognition and human credit scores in China and stuff like that, can't happen here. This is America. That can't happen here. What do you say to that person?
Well, it's happening in other governments when the apparatus and everything that China has right now, the United States has that capability. We have the exact same capability. Are we using it exactly the same way? No, we're not using it as invasively. But what's to stop government from doing it one day? Mm-hmm. It's just that easy. It's just that simple. And to me, from what we've seen from government in the past, if there's potential for government to abuse something, it's just a matter of time before they do. There's one example after another of that. So when we know that that's a potential, the potential for abuse is there, why would we continue to let it be? I mean, it's one of those things that we need to acknowledge is a thing. That's the biggest thing is it can't happen here. Well, yeah, it can. It really can. Ask the Tea Party.
Yeah, exactly.
And ask the Black Panthers. Ask Martin Luther King. All these people have been targeted. All these groups have been targeted by our government. So it can certainly happen here. And when you have the capabilities that this particular surveillance apparatus has, man, it can get out of hand quick.
Well, all right. Well, let me hit you with devil's advocate number 2 then. What do you say to the person that says that, well, if they put up a spy camera in the park and because of that they catch a bad guy, I mean, hard quotations, of course, on bad guy, but they catch a bad guy. Well, I mean, it seems like it's working as intended then. So why should I be upset about the cops going after the bad guys and using whatever is at their disposal to do it?
Well, first things first, it cost $30,000 for that particular camera in my neighborhood.
Just that one.
Just that one.
Wow.
That one, $30,000 for the one pole, and that was with the admission of the current police chief that there was enough overtime budget in the city's allocation of funds to actually increase patrols in that neighborhood of using officers and money that was already accounted for. So from just being a fiscally responsible shepherd of our local money, I'm not sure that that's the best investment of our funds, especially when we already had funds allocated to it. Also, what we have discovered is a lot of times, criminals aren't stupid. They commit crimes for a living. And when they see the presence of a pole, it doesn't necessarily curtail or prevent the activity from happening, but it just pushes it out further away from where that surveillance device is. So it's really not saying that the spy pole is actually preventing anything from happening. If anything, it's just pushing it farther and deeper into the community. Yeah. Spy poles cannot make a stop. They cannot make an arrest. They are a little less efficient than what cops already do anyway. Cops are not there to serve and protect. They're there to show up after the fact and take a report. That's typically what they do, and then they'll do an investigation if they deem it's necessary or if they have the resources to follow up. A spy pole is even more limited than that. It might serve as a witness to an occurrence, but it's certainly not going to make a stop. It's not going to make an arrest. So if you want real crime prevention, there's probably better ways of doing it than sinking $30,000 into a spy pole that's going to be infringing on the people's privacy that live around that park.
Now, I have one more as devil's advocate to give you, but I want to take a quick goat trail on that. So I didn't realize that just the one little installation there was $30,000. It's the only reason I'm not even surprised that that's true, and I'm laughing because of course Blake's here and Blake knows a lot about audio video, and I bet if I said to Blake right now, Blake, can you put me up a pole with a camera feed on it? Here's $10,000. I bet you'd be like, whoopee, like I can do that. Yeah. So I have a hunch that it's only $30,000 because government paid for it.
Yeah.
I'd probably say you were probably right about that. Now, the particular pole, it has 4 cameras. So there's 4 cameras there, but it is a relatively small park. We have some very, very large parks in our community that would easily, if the city were to expand this little spy pole program, could cost upwards of $150,000 or more to actually outfit these parks with this equipment. So yeah, I'm not sure that it's the best use of resources here, especially when we're having a hard time covering other expenses. Yeah. So.
All right, so I'll hit you with everybody's favorite. Are you gonna go down the if you have nothing to fear, you have nothing to hide? If you have nothing, this is everybody's favorite. If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to fear. What do you? And the only reason I'm throwing you that softball is because, as cliche as it is, that's the type of response you'll get from the conservative who would wonder why you're so upset with the government.
Well, to the conservative, I would ask, hey, do you have a locking door on your bedroom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have curtains in your house? Because if you do, then privacy does matter. If it didn't matter to you, you wouldn't have a door on your bedroom, and you wouldn't have curtains on your house. We take it out a step further. Mike Maharry, my partner, he always he likes to dare people to send their browsing history to us so that we can publish it. And we've not had anybody take us up on this. People say, if you got nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. They don't mean it. None of them mean it. When you put it in your hands and take a real close study of that whole statement, nobody ever means it. If that were the case, they wouldn't have curtains and doors, and they wouldn't tint their windows of their car and all these other things that we do in society to maintain some semblance of privacy. It's funny because a lot of the folks that we catch, especially on our we see watching Lexington Threads, that come and hit us, some of the bootlickers that hit us. When you go to look at their Facebook profile, they have their privacy settings set to the most stringent possible, so you can't see anything about these folks. Yeah, but they if you got nothing to hide, you got nothing to fear. And it's a load of malarkey, man. I think privacy is the sole nexus. It's the source of which most all of our other rights derive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important, and anybody who is dismissive of that really doesn't get it anyway, and they're probably not thinking about what they're actually saying. Without privacy, all of our other rights you can't have them. Privacy is the anchor point of almost every one of our other rights.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Blake?
Oh, I was just going to point out that, I think a lot of people use that as an excuse, that it's like if I'm not doing anything wrong, so, it doesn't bother me. But actually what they're really saying is there's nothing I can do about it anyway, so what am I going to do? I'll just throw my rights away.
Well, what kills me, so I always take that's just signaling, right? Like whenever someone makes a comment like that, my answer is who are you signaling to? Like no one cares. Like who are you letting know that you're a good little soldier?
Yeah. That's a great point, man.
So the last point I'm going to make on that really quick, and then I'm gonna get you out of here on one more question, is you hear the popular analogy that our justice system is so ass backwards that like the average person commits like however many felonies a day or whatever it is because there's just so many laws and so much regulation that it's actually physically difficult for you to go into town, do a little shopping, and come home and not have broken a law somewhere. Unbeknownst to you. And so that alone, just because we have to tackle one issue at a time, right? Like we just don't have the resources to fight the state on every front every single minute. That if the front we're choosing to fight today is Fourth Amendment and privacy, then maybe that's a good place to start, because if we're accidentally committing 17 felonies a day, we don't want a bunch of tape showing us doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Clay, I'm going to get you out of here on this one. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
And that's the question, man. I don't know that anybody's allowed to escape your show without weighing in on it. So I'm going to go with. It's hard to defy Tom Woods, man. It really is. You can't walk into a Quiznos and get a hot dog.
Yeah.
You can't walk into a Subway and get a hot dog.
But I can't walk into those places and get a good sandwich anyway.
Well, it's true, man. I've never been to New York, so I don't know how many delis actually serve hot dogs, but that would be an interesting study. But to me, man, no, it doesn't fit the qualifications. You don't have two individual split pieces of bread. You don't have, you have, I guess, horizontal layers on a hot dog instead of vertical layers.
It's getting mathematical.
Yeah.
Starting to draw schematics.
Okay, but what if I eat my hot dog with 2 slices of bread?
Ooh.
The sacred geometry of the hot dog just does. It's not, man.
So you're
Sorry.
saying a sandwich has to have flat meat?
I think it needs to have 2 separate pieces of bread.
Okay, but then, so based on that logic then, so if you put the hot dog in the hot dog bun and then you roll the bun and the bun splits, it has now, by your logic, transformed itself into a sandwich.
Yeah, I think at that point it's a redo and you toss the bun, man. I think it's a do-over because
He's got his own style. It's all good.
fucked up the hot dog, man. It's not a proper hot dog.
So, see, Mance Raider was on the show, and he was saying that they were poor and they didn't have hot dog buns, so they just ate it with regular bread. So that's a sandwich then.
Well, if it's one piece, then no, it's not. If you rolled it up into one piece, because I think, we're going to define it as 2 separate pieces of bread for the sandwich. So if you're only using one piece of Wonder bread, it's still a hot dog.
But if you rolled it up, now it's a wrap or a burrito.
Ooh, or a taco.
Well, that probably could be made. That case could be made. But as far as it being a sandwich, no, it's not a sandwich, man. Sorry.
Well, I hate. Well, this is your last appearance on the show, so thank you so much. Look. Hashtag an inconvenient truth for all of you naysayers. Look, it's a sandwich. You cannot like the fact. I will say this, though. What sounds more accurate to you? If I said, I want a hot dog wrap, or I want a hot dog sandwich. Which sounds more realistic?
They both sound really awkward to me, man.
I want a hot dog taco.
I'd rather get right to the point and say, man, I really want a hot dog right now.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all making me hungry.
Everybody would know what I was talking about when I said that. They're not going to picture a hot dog sandwich between 2 pieces of Wonder Bread. They're gonna picture, the split bun with the condiments of their choice, that whatever they picture in their head being, a perfect hot dog. And so sorry, man.
There you go.
See, but when I was a little kid, like my mom would cut the hot dog, like slice it long ways in half so that it was 2 slices laying on a flat bread.
Right.
That's a sandwich, damn it.
I would put the split in there, man, but I would get cheese.
Wait,
and
what?
Then broil that hot dog, man, so that the cheese gets nice and melted, and then you get some blackening of the outside, and then slap that thing on a hot dog bun, man. You got a nice cheesy hot dog.
If you're going to broil it like that, now it has become a hot dog slider.
Now you just kidding. Come on, man.
Thanks.
Clay, thank you so much for being with us. Clay from We See You Watching Lexington and the 10th Amendment Center. We've advertised those both many times on the show before, but we'll keep doing it because the issue is not going away. Clay, do you have anything else to leave us with now that you've ruined the entire show?
Hey, just everybody who watches, take a couple minutes to hit the 10th Amendment Center website.
Yes.
You can learn a lot more about my work with the Fourth Amendment Protection Act. And if you like what you see there and you think that that's something that would be a good thing in your individual state, please call your state legislator and let them know that you're in favor of the Fourth Amendment Protection Act. I will be contacting them all soon myself. And we're going to see if we can get a few more states on board. And also, while you're at it, support our work and throw us a couple of bucks. 10th Amendment Center website, they've got a nice little donation thing there. You can contribute as little as $2 a month and help us out, man. We need everybody's support. We get a lot of support, but we punch up, and
Yes.
we punch up at giants with a very, very small budget. And we could use a few ducats. So help us out with some donations and help us out by reading and sharing and liking all of our stuff.
That's right.
And if you like some of the things we talked about with my local campaign, you can see all of that at WeSeeYouWatchingLexington.com, where we chronicle every last bit of our campaign here to bring transparency and oversight and accountability to the surveillance state in Lexington, Kentucky.
That's perfect. Well, Clay, thank you so much for being with us. Guys at home, go to all those websites and the 10thamendmentcenter.com. I don't know if it's still /donate, but the donate button is right there. We've donated to the 10th Amendment Center. Also, social media, facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley. Twitter is at Alan M. Mosley. And you really don't have to do any of that because you could just go to our website, which is thegoldstandardpodcast.com, where you will see more content such as our interview with Clay. I'm trying to point now at the, it's the other way. See, yeah, there's the.
That way.
Yeah, so if you're watching on YouTube, there it is. Yeah. No, point the other way, Clay. All right, yeah, no, the other way. The other way. Yeah. All
There
right.
it is.
There, boom. All right, we're pointing
ET
there.
phone home.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.